Hi everyone, this is Matt Berkowitz here, now ex-coordinator of the Zeitgeist Movement Vancouver Chapter and ex-global lecture team member of the Zeitgeist Movement. This video will outline the gist of the story that forced me to part ways with the Zeitgeist Movement. I was hesitant to create this video for fear of being accused of further mudslinging or fueling the fire, so to speak, but enough people have asked me what has happened that led me to no longer being able to associate with the Zeitgeist Movement and have encouraged I record and release this. So this segment will serve that purpose and lay the issue to rest as far as I'm concerned. I will condense the story as I see it as much as possible, with links below in the video description that shed further background on what I described. I understand that to many, TZM has become a bit of an emotional crux where criticism of it as an institution or of the content it puts out is met with defensiveness or the perception that the critic is just trolling. I must admit I somewhat fell into this camp in the earlier days, and I urge those who may be listening who feel defensive with respect to what I'm about to describe to take pause and to try to reflect on why this is and consider the perspective I will offer. So let me get right down to it. I've been active with TZM more or less since day one, having been involved right after the startup of the local chapter here in Vancouver. I got involved like many did after seeing the second Zeitgeist film, and the solutions proposed really resonated with me, to the extent that I went to work researching as best as I could to verify the material put forth, and eventually decided to get involved. This was before I had really developed proper critical thinking skills, in the sense of understanding scientific skepticism and a good understanding of the scientific process as it operates in practice. I ended up becoming the main spokesman for my local chapter here, doing radio interviews, lectures, and the like, eventually joining the TZM Global Lecture Team and doing talks abroad for the annual Z-Day event. I ended up working fairly closely with Peter Joseph on many projects, including the TZM Defined book that I edited with Ben McLeish, and other materials. I even became good personal friends with Peter and had a lot of respect for him. Since the early days, I and others locally recognized the serious lack of infrastructure that TZM suffered from since day one, and had advocated for some proper structure to be set up. There needed to be a more specifically defined organizational structure with specific roles delegated to specific people who are accountable, and who are replaced if they are incompetent. It has really just been a free-for-all the whole time, with one person at the top controlling almost all media content and with control over most admin channels for TZM Global. Despite the TZM party line of being a leaderless movement, it functioned in a way that is anything but this. The structure has also never been accessible or visible to outsiders, such that when new people join, there is always so much confusion as to the proper channels they should travel through to get involved. The suggestions to correct these issues often fell on deaf ears, or at least they were verbally acknowledged while nothing was ever really done with it. I figured that any such problems were outweighed by the importance of the message TZM put forward, and as such continued to remain very active, with the hope of trying to improve such problems. Through my personal evolution, I learned more and more about science, skepticism, and the methodologies related, to the extent that I wished to speak out and promote such ideas within a movement that largely suffered from a membership prone to believing in pseudoscience and conspiracy theories, and for a movement that claims to promote, quote, the scientific method for social concern. I found this deeply troubling. It also became more and more clear as I refined my skepticism that a big portion of this problem was due to the origins of TZM and the inevitable association with the first Zeitgeist film. Despite numerous attempts to separate the Zeitgeist film series and the Zeitgeist movement, the distinction has failed to be made clear to outsiders, not least of which because the same person is behind the creation of each. I'll get back to this point later. I did a lecture for the 2013 Z-Day event in LA on logical fallacies, which was one attempt to inject a boost of skepticism and better logic into TZM. From my perspective, it was quite well received. My Z-Day 2014 talk was about using science as a basis for morality, to serve as the philosophical approach that underpins the concept of a resource-based economy, as it is central to its thesis. My last TZM-related talk was the one that I think was the most important I did in all my time affiliated, one directly targeting the promotion of science literacy, offering tools that could allow people to more accurately assess scientific research. And to drill many points home and make impact, I intentionally used a few socially contentious examples. I knew this would create a bit of a stir due to the high degree of pseudoscience believers in TZM, but I figured such a stir was necessary in order to solidify TZM as a legitimately science-based organization. So let's pause for a second to make it clear what the two main problems are with TZM as I see it. Number one, the lack of infrastructure, both in terms of the lack of properly defined roles and protocol for administrative duties, and in terms of one person at the top taking on a disproportionate amount of work, often acting in isolation and as a dictatorship with respect to how decisions are made. And the second problem, which very much relates to the first, is the association of TZM with pseudoscience and conspiracy theories. Now, let me be clear, I'm not saying that central to TZM's work is the outright promotion of pseudoscience and conspiracy theories. I'm saying that due to the lack of clear distinction between the Zeitgeist film series and the Zeitgeist movement, there has always been this confusion in a PR sense, and members since day one have had to constantly explain the difference to newcomers. There is further the problem of Peter Joseph, who claims not to be a leader but acts as if he is one, and his position of being idolized by many in the community, who often look up to him for cues as to what to believe and whose personal views are consequently not well separated from TZM. As a case in point, the most commonly used material when promoting TZM is the film series, specifically the second and third films, with many chapters still giving out the first film, which is really a horrendous work content-wise when it comes to scientific accuracy in all three sections, and it has very much stained the reputation of TZM from the start. But I won't deviate into discussing that here. These issues have translated into lower and lower interest in TZM over the years, at least by the measure of Google Trends. So obviously, something is wrong. So, back to my last TZM talk on science literacy. Its release was met with lots of noise and complaints from the pseudoscience and conspiracy theory promoters within TZM, much of which got directed to Peter, which understandably got on his nerves, to the extent that he suggested we remove the video from the official channel to appease community dissent. I was not happy about this, and voiced my concern over removing a video that describes the very thing that the organization is supposed to stand for, understanding the scientific process and its relationship to social progress. Peter suggested, and I agreed, that the fate of the video would be determined in a Global Chapters Administration, or GCA meeting. The GCA, for those who don't know, is an internal admin body of TZM that works to provide chapter support, among other things. So that meeting was had, and by the end, 7 out of 8 people present in the meeting agreed that the video was to stay, but that a disclaimer was to be placed in the video description that the contents were not necessarily representative of what TZM promotes. I wasn't overly happy with this disclaimer, but this was what the consensus was, and I agreed to it. As a slight tangent, by the way, several of the members on this team, like much of the membership of TZM, are very confused when it comes to how science operates, professing beliefs in a range of pseudoscientific positions and conspiracy theories. One volunteer of the team sticks out specifically in being particularly belligerent, promoting homeopathy, all sorts of other absurd alternative medicine remedies, outlandish conspiracy theories, chemtrails, and so forth. Just as a point of personal commentary, this is embarrassing. Here we have an organization that is supposed to be founded upon the use of the scientific method for social concern, and we have people like this representing it, promoting such views. It's frankly a disgrace and a testament to the type of people this organization often attracts. And I don't buy the justification that as long as people keep their personal beliefs separate from TZM activism, then there is no issue. Beliefs affect other beliefs, and as such, if you are someone following the paleo diet, believe that evil big pharma is suppressing cancer cures, and deny mountains of well-established scientific truths, these beliefs will invariably tarnish your activism efforts. This is, of course, not to insult the many excellent people I've met in the organization, and who I remain good friends with today. So anyway, let's continue. During this time, I was in communication with Peter, who really resented the fact that we had to discuss such a problem, and who was admittedly more concerned with keeping the peace within TZM rather than producing output that is representative of TZM. He told me in an email that he appreciated most of the content, but would have used different word choices in certain areas and not called out certain groups as being guilty of promoting pseudoscience. I understood his concerns, even if I didn't agree with them, and we decided to move on, though with a slightly tainted relationship due to my staunch defense of my lecture content and choice of communication tactics. Such emails on my behalf were never meant to invoke emotional upset in Peter, but they appeared to trigger anger and frustration in his part, to the extent that he uttered some rather aggressive and character-deriding remarks towards me. On several occasions, I offered to Skype with Peter to iron out all our issues and disagreements, to see if we could come to a point of convergence, or at least compromise in how to proceed. But he straight out said he did not have time for it and ignored my request to Skype. He just wanted to move on and not discuss the issue anymore. Needless to say, he did not share my view that pseudoscience and conspiracy thinking was dominant and a problem within TZM. No doubt because he promotes his fair share of both, having promoted in the past 9/11 conspiracy theories, anti-vaccination views, alternative cancer cures, and conspiracy theories associated with their alleged suppression, anti-GMO views, and so forth. More time passed and we continued to work together and communicate through email, though I knew this would not be the last of the issue. Another wave of hate mails about my lecture eventually started back up and got directed to Peter, at which point he got in touch with me again and suggested we remove the video, with my permission. I once again defended the importance of the video staying up and said that my and others' participation in TZM is contingent on the video remaining up due to what it represents, being careful not to communicate this as a threat, but as a real issue to consider. Peter did not like this and retorted with the most emotionally belligerent email yet, accusing me of having distorted motives, of wanting attention, and of being insensitive to what he has to deal with because of the video. I was floored, but tried my best to patch things up, though I again knew that nothing was solved and that our relationship would be very tainted going forward. The final straw came in late October 2014, when Peter made a post on his Facebook channel, promoting an alternative cancer cure, and by extension, conspiracy theory responsible for its alleged suppression by the cancer establishment, attempting to make a larger point about how science works. He also uttered some scientifically unsupported statements about GMOs and their supposed link to health and ecological problems. This bothered me, once again, because of the blurred distinction between what PJ says and what TZM represents, as people view him as a figurehead. So I decided to leave a comment on the Facebook thread with a link to an article that debunks the claims in the film Peter linked to, and requesting that Peter present evidence to substantiate his claims about GMOs. I admittedly could have chosen my words better if I had only left out the word ridiculous when stating that the article I linked to debunked many of the ridiculous claims in the documentary, but there was certainly nothing disrespectful in my short comment. My comment was deleted immediately, and I received an emotionally charged, angry email from Peter telling me how thoughtless and insulting I'd been, and how this confirmed my lack of research skills, tact, and invulnerability. He went on to hugely project how distorted my motives were and how I just don't get what TZM is about. He sent a follow-up email instructing me that all my admin privileges in the various TZM channels had been or were about to be removed, and issued a few more ad homs my way. All this triggered from a two-liner in a Facebook thread that countered information he put forward, which, to be fair, was likely just an eruption of the annoyance and anger he had towards me in the months past for our disagreements about science and PR in TZM. I knew this was the end of my participation in TZM. Since I had tried ad nauseum to discuss these issues in a more personal way with him, at first through email, and then, as I suggested, over Skype, which he refused, I decided that this was now a public issue, since it affects TZM as an organization, and the people who identify with and participate in this organization needed to know the situation. However, I knew that my doing so would likely spur objections, especially from the members who assume anyone criticizing TZM or Peter is an attention-seeking troll or something like that. So I posted a brief summary of these events on my personal Facebook page. This was on October 28, 2014. Which, if you're Facebook friends with me, you can certainly go back and read it to verify. In discussions with a few sympathizers, I was encouraged to draft a one-page letter to outline my concerns with the organization, which again are the severe infrastructural issues and the perceived association of TZM as a promoter of pseudoscience and conspiracy theories, which is mostly a function of the former issue. I drafted the letter and posted it a few days later and sought signatures from people who felt the same way. The goal was to get the attention of the GCA and other prominent TZM members to recognize these issues were legitimate and agreed upon by many. And it is signed by nearly 100 ex and current members of TZM, including many coordinators and others who had or have prominent roles. During this time, in what I can only assume was in emotional fury, Peter Joseph outright deleted my science literacy video, despite the GCA consensus agreeing that it should stay up, displaying in full shine his dictatorial behavior. Now, people might think I'm being harsh and emotionally driven in stating it that way, but consider the facts. The video was uploaded initially by Peter in early June 2014. When people started complaining, it was suggested that the GCA decide the ultimate fate of the video. The GCA arrived at a consensus that the video was to stay, but with a disclaimer in the video description. After I angered Peter by responding to his Facebook thread on an allegedly suppressed cancer cure, he deleted me as an admin from all TZM media channels and subsequently deleted my video after I drafted the aforementioned letter. That is dictatorial, plain and simple, and I'm going to label Peter's behavior the way I see it so that people are aware of the personality that manages this organization and what they are involved with by participating in it. Later, he removed nearly all of my work from the TZM official channel, even though it had nothing to do at all with this whole ordeal. Another dictatorial move, which I can only guess was because the guy can't stand me now and doesn't want my name to be associated with TZM publicly. Which, really, is actually fine with me, since it's rather embarrassing now in my mind to be associated with such an organization. But on the other hand, it's a shame that all the content I worked hard at creating over the years is gone, though almost all of the main lectures are still hosted elsewhere online at least. As an aside, another aspect of his dictatorial behavior is his liberal use of the block and delete buttons of Facebook comments to either his personal Facebook page and even the TZM global one. Countless people have reported this. It doesn't even have to be disrespectful either. It can simply be a comment that disagrees with Peter's perspective, such as about alternative cancer cures or ethical veganism. And you can bet that if you challenge him, your comment will get deleted, and perhaps you'll be blocked if you do it enough. Now, he's certainly entitled to do what he wants on his personal Facebook page, but he's also liable for criticism of such behavior. Anyway, the GCA got a hold of the letter and the concerns that were mounted, and I and the signees of the letter were invited to an open meeting on the TZM TeamSpeak server to discuss the issues and possible resolutions. The meeting was held a week later over the course of a 2-hour meeting. But in summary, there was a consensus amongst the GCA and the other attendees that these issues existed, which was discussed in the first half of the meeting. However, when it came to actually putting something in action, the GCA was hesitant to do anything. No concrete action plans were agreed on by the end of the meeting. And this is where it ends. Nothing was communicated to me by the GCA after this, indicating that they either don't recognize the importance of the issue or that they don't care enough to confront Peter with his ridiculous behavior and make some drastic changes. I did all I felt was warranted and realized that I was banging my head against a brick wall in terms of changing a hopelessly broken organizational structure. Many people urged me to continue trying to increase scientific skepticism within the organization, and I'm appreciative of these requests. However, it comes a time when one has to evaluate the opportunity cost of one's time, and I am now in the position where I feel it a complete waste of time to continue advocating the ideas in association with TZM as an institution or identifier. I still agree with many of the tenets that TZM puts forward, but many of the specifics are simply not well thought out or not based on the best evidence available. For example, if TZM advocates the best of science applied to society, an idea that I can certainly get behind, presumably this would reference the scientific consensus position for as many areas as possible as are relevant to the issues TZM discusses, right? However, it seems TZM is selective about which consensuses it embraces. For example, it acknowledges climate change, for which there is a massive scientific consensus, but doesn't seem to embrace the vast consensuses on the safety and usefulness of both GMOs and nuclear energy. And the latter two issues are at least as relevant to the subject of social sustainability. So why is this so? What metric is being used to determine which consensuses TZM adheres to? It appears to simply be decided based on which subjects are palatable to its membership, which ones are perceived to be corrupted by the dominant institutions invested in these fields of research, despite any real evidence for this corruption, or more bluntly, it's simply up to what Peter agrees with based on his subjective whims, without any reference to a solid scientific metric. I posed versions of this question to Peter on numerous occasions through email, but never got a proper response. I don't want to tell others what to do, but I would issue a piece of advice to those who are still active in this organization. If you recognize these problems, can you justify to yourself spending time supporting this institution? I know the TZM party line is, it's about the train of thought, not loyalty to an institution. But then, given the fatal flaws of the organization that show no sign of being resolved even slightly, why not continue on promoting supportive values and ideas without the institutional framework, which I would contend, at this point, does more damage to your cause than help? In my mind, TZM's image and thus potential to affect change has been destroyed by its founder and de facto leader, who is in complete denial about the role he plays in it and attacks anyone who challenges him. Furthermore, I have realized that science literacy is a necessary prerequisite for spreading the ideas that TZM claims to support and promote, both for the people who promote the ideas and the audience. Hence, this really ought to be the focus. This is why I have decided to continue on in my own platform. I will be starting a video series and YouTube channel, aptly titled Science Literacy, in which I will promote just that, science literacy, and more broadly, how the scientific process works, both in theory and in practice. I'll look chronologically at topics like how scientific consensus emerges and how reliable it is. I'll discuss corruption in science, the phenomenon of science denialism and its psychological underpinnings, as well as conspiracy theory thinking, and everything related to that contentious topic. I will then delve into the specific steps people ought to take to get to the bottom of various topics, and do specialized videos for all these social hot topics of our time, spanning from GMOs to psychiatry. I will do this all in what will probably be 5 to 10 minute videos in as digestible a format as possible, so that anyone can understand this stuff. After all, I'm not a scientist and don't pretend to have expertise in most of this stuff, but I do understand the process and methodology inherent to the scientific enterprise, and wish to help others understand this as well. So that's where I'll leave you. I hope that helps clear up any ambiguities for those who did not follow these events as they ensued. I want to thank everyone for listening and for the immense amount of support I received throughout these times. I am truly appreciative. I also want to thank everyone for their support of my work with TZM over the years, and I hope my future work will be interesting and worthwhile for whomever checks it out. Thank you very much, everyone.